Here we are having the discussion of the history test of Gallant IAS. So the first question is, the prosperity of Vijayanagara Empire found expression in its rich artistic and cultural achievements. Analyze. This is a 10-marker question and we have to write an answer in 150 words. So first we have to give a decent introduction, which can be like this. The Vijayanagara Empire, enriched by flourishing agriculture, overseas trade, and efficient administration, emerged as a foremost center of art, architecture, literature. See, in this introduction, we are giving a positive side to what is being asked in the question. Okay. So to enrich our answer, we are here providing a map where we are clearly showing Vijayanagara Empire and one of their most prominent site, Hampi. And if you know any other temple or something, you can add in this map so that you can enrich your answer. So now we are moving to the first part of the question. How the prosperity of Vijayanagara is reflected in artistic and cultural achievements. So it's better if you give this kind of heading to whatever being subparts that has to be addressed in the question. So better give the heading. The first point is monumental architecture. So whatever things they have constructed, construction of grand temple, you can give the examples like Virupaksha temple, Vithala temple, which showcases Dravidian architecture. You can talk about Raya Gopurams. These kind of examples will definitely fetch you more marks for this kind of art and culture questions. So next thing is the advanced culture of Vijayanagara. Like they are having very intricate carvings, musical pillars, the very iconic stone chariot, and those things which they have detailed depictions from Ramayana and Mahabharata. So another thing about them is the urban planning. The capital Hampi, which was very well planned, it had well planned markets, irrigation tanks. You can mention the Kamalapuram tank, roads, etc. And next is the literary patronage. So even you can mention Krishna Devaraya, his work Amukta Malyada, you can mention here. And if you know any other works which is from Vijayanagara, you can also mention. And always mention about Sanskrit, Telugu, Kannada, Tamil literature, which was greatly flourishing under this empire. Now we can mention about music and performing arts like Carnatic music, dance traditions, etc. So all these 5 headings or subheadings which reflect these 5 subheadings shows the dimensions you can add to this question. We have given clearly about the monumental architecture, sculpture, urban planning, literary patronage, and about the music and performing arts. So we have given 5 dimensions to this question. So the question was about the prosperity of Vijayanagara Empire found expression in its rich artistic and cultural achievements analyzed. So we have to say the other side to this question, that is the prosperity was not just in this kind of architectural things, they had some other things also that is being discussed here. They had this economic prosperity, good network of good commerce, good maritime trade. You can talk about the trade with Persia, Arabia, etc. Then they had good urban development. Hampi was a center. You can talk about the agriculture and irrigation. What was the agrarian prosperity of the empire? You can mention about the Kamalapura tank, Tungabhadra river, how they used it. You can talk about the administrative efficiency. You can mention the Nayaga or Amaranayaka system. Then you can talk about the military strength. They had massive fortifications at Hampi, Arabian horse cavalry, war elephants, artillery, etc. So we are making our answer such a way that Vijayanagara had its rich artistic and cultural achievements, but the prosperity was not only this, they had some other factors too, which are economic prosperity, urban development, agriculture, administrative efficiency, and their military strength. Okay. So after this, we can conclude our answer. The artistic and cultural splendor of Vijayanagara Empire was a direct outcome of its economic affluence, administrative efficiency, religious patronage, its enduring legacy, preserved in the monuments of group of monuments in Hampi represents one of the finest expression of India's medieval cultural heritage. So if any current affair based things are happening in the news regarding Vijayanagara Empire, you can also add this in your answer so that you can have a current linkage to your answer. So now we are moving to the second question. Compare and contrast the Gandhara, Mathura, Amaravati schools of art. How did they contribute to the development of Indian sculpture and Buddhist iconography? It's a 10 marker, obviously 150 words. Okay, you can give introduction. If any current happenings have been occurred, you can give a current based introduction. Otherwise, this would be fine. The Gandhara, Mathura, Amaravati schools, it would be better if you mention the time period so that examiner can get a clear idea that you know very correctly about this. Represent the golden age of early Indian sculpture. While each evolved under distinct cultural influences, together they shape the evolution of Buddhist iconography and classical Indian sculptural traditions. So next step, we are gonna compare and contrast. Regarding region, Gandhara school was in the present day Gandhara region of Pakistan, Afghanistan. Mathura was in the Uttar Pradesh region. Amaravati was in the Andhra Pradesh region. Then about the material influence, about the material used, Gandhara used a grey colored stone. It was schist stone, grey schist. Mathura used red sandstone. Amaravati used white limestone. Regarding influence, Gandhara had the Greco-Roman influence. Mathura was indigenous. Amaravati school had Shadavahana elements as well as indigenous Indian elements. Then regarding Buddha image, Gandhara school had human-like realistic feature. Regarding Mathura, it was more spiritual, more idealized Indian features. And regarding Amaravati, it was more slender and graceful dynamic forms. And regarding the drapery, how it was draped, Gandhara had heavy flowing robes. Mathura had thin and transparent garments. Amaravati had fine and elegant drapery. Now you can talk about the expression. It was in Gandhara, it was naturalistic and calm expressions for the whatever they have created. Regarding Mathura, it was spiritual and symbolic. And regarding Amaravati, it was more narrative and expressive figures. Okay. So regarding theme, Gandhara school had most of it as regarding Buddhist themes. Mathura had Buddha, Jaina and Brahmanical deities. And Amaravati, again, they had more to the Buddhist side. And now since we have compared, now we go to the second part of the question, contribution of all of these schools to Indian sculpture and Buddhist iconography. First of all, they introduced the human images of Buddha. Okay, so replace the symbolic representation. Earlier Buddha was represented in stupa, Bodhi tree, footprints, etc. It was being replaced with the human figures of Buddha. Okay, so you can give an example. See, in art and culture, the greatest value addition to your answers can be adding maps, giving examples, and good amount of examples can be collected from NCERT books itself. Okay. So example, standing Buddha of Gandhara, seated Buddha of Mathura. This is a very good example. This is even being discussed in NCERT. Second point, they developed a distinct regional sculptural forms. It was kind of artistic diversity. Okay, each school evolved a unique style. What we have talked here, style was very unique. Unique style enriching the diversity. For example, grey schist sculptures at Gandhara, red sandstone at Mathura, white limestone at Amaravati. Refines cultural techniques and aesthetics. See, you can use this keyword. This is very good. Technical excellence. Okay, improved realism, anatomical precision, ornamentation and dynamic composition. Example, realistic drapery in Gandhara, very intricate narrative cravings on Amaravati stupa. This can be given as a good example. Established canonical forms for religious iconography. Like they introduced features like mudra, halo, which became popular in these schools of art, and this has been accepted later into Indian sculpture too. Example, you can give Buddha images from Mathura and Gandhara. So fifth point, they laid the foundation for the classical Gupta school of sculpture. Okay, that legacy, it was later carried by Guptas. Like their innovations, etc., refined the later Gupta style, influencing later Indian art and artisans. So example, Buddha images from Sarnath during Gupta period can be given as an example. So since we have addressed both the parts of the question, and to this, to add some value, you can again add a map showing the Gandhara region, Amaravati region, and one more was there, right? Mathura region. You can add a map. That is the addition that can be given to this question, and after that you can conclude, despite the different styles, Gandhara, Madura and Amravati schools collectively established the foundation of Indian sculpture, transforming Buddhist art from this to this. And you can, whatever you can keywords you want, you can use here, and you can definitely conclude the answer. Now we move to the third question. This is a relatively very simple question. This is very basic question from your textbooks. The decline of the Mughal Empire was the cumulative result of political, first dimension we have to address here, political, administrative, economic and military weaknesses. Elaborate. So the keyword is elaborate. It's a 10 marker, obviously 150 words. You have to elaborate whatever is being asked in this question. Okay. Obviously, you can give an introduction, the decline of Mughal Empire. It's very good if you mention the time period. Okay. In the 18th century was not caused by a single factor, but by the cumulative effect of political instability, administrative decay, economic distress, military decline. Whatever good conclusion, whatever suits you, you can give. And if you want, you can add a map of India and you can show how the earlier Mughals look like and after, and what about the situation in 18th century, you can give a comparison map if you want. Now, since this is having 4 dimensions here itself in the question, start addressing the question just below the introduction. Otherwise, you won't be having the necessary space and time to complete this question. So, regarding political weaknesses, you can use a keyword political fragmentation. Wars of succession. Point number 1, wars of succession. So, there was succession wars, example, succession struggle after Aurangzeb. See, since after Aurangzeb's death, Mughals really faced the fragmentation process, okay. This stability was greatly affected. So, succession struggle after Aurangzeb, then weak successors. Later Mughal emperors, they lacked the leadership, which is a required quality to rule, okay, and administrative ability of earlier rulers. Example, Muhammad Shah, he was called Rangila. Then third point, you can give rise of regional powers. Provincial governors and local rulers, they asserted the autonomy. For example, independent states of Hyderabad, Oudh and Bengal, and rise of Marathas. Next is the administrative weakness. You can give a keyword institutional decay. Okay. So here also we are discussing 3 points: Jagirdari crisis, decline of the Mansabdari system, and weak provincial administration. So regarding Jagirdari crisis, it was shortage of Jagirs. So that led to corruption and competition. For example, nobles struggled over revenue-rich Jagirs. We can give just example. Then decline of the Mansabdari system. Mansabdars, what they happened? They became very inefficient. So they prioritized the personal interest. So many failed to maintain required number of troops. So when this kind of foreign invasions, etc. came, India was very helpless at that time. Then weak provincial administration, like governors exercised greater autonomy, and this is very evidently seen when Nizam al-Mulk established the autonomous state of Hyderabad. So next we speak about the economic weaknesses. One is the costly military campaign, and this is the very famous thing, the Aurangzeb's Deccan campaigns and that Deccan policy, and how it resulted in exhausting the imperial treasury. This is a good example. Next is declining agricultural revenue. Heavy taxation, agrarian distress, etc. was a factor for this. And for example, peasant revolts by Jats, Satnamis and Sikhs can be given as an example. Next is disruption of trade and commerce. For example, political instability, and this happened when Nadir Shah came and he invaded India. He even took the Peacock Throne, and the economy was completely disrupted. He looted the economy actually. Next, we talk about the military weaknesses. Obviously, the military, it was very outdated. Okay, outdated military technology. They failed to modernize the weapons and these kind of things. And when Europeans came, what happened? They had the advanced weapons with them. So India was lacking in that, and British was able to establish an empire here. So inferior military organizations compared to emerging European powers. Next is decline in military discipline. Mansabdars, earlier we talked about it. Mansabdars rejected the troop maintenance. So what happened? When foreign invasions or European invasions came, India was helpless at that point of time. Then continuous defeats. The weakened army failed to suppress the internal revolts, especially against Marathas and attack of Delhi by Nadir Shah. Okay, so we have effectively discussed the 4 dimension which has been asked in the question, and now we go to the concluding part. The Mughal Empire declined due to the interplay of political fragmentation. Whatever being asked in the question, we are linking those points to a conclusion. Interplay of political fragmentation, administrative inefficiency, fiscal crisis, military stagnation, external pressure, etc. And these weakened and it paved the way for the emergence of regional states and eventually the British colonial dominance in India, which was for years and years. Okay. Now we move to the fourth question. This question is regarding Rajaram Mohan Roy, and this area is very important for this year. Even you can expect a question in UPSC mains. Rajaram Mohan Roy was not merely a social reformer but an intellectual architect of India's democratic and modern political consciousness. Elaborate. Okay, you can give a good introduction. See, topics like this, na Rajaram Mohan Roy, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, or Jyotiba Phule, try to prepare some ready-made introduction for yourself, so that when these questions are asked now, you can give a quality keyword enriched introduction, so that you can fetch a good marks in introduction part. Rajaram Mohan Roy is regarded as the father of Indian Renaissance. This is first keyword. Beyond pioneering social reforms, he introduced the ideas of liberalism, constitutionalism, rationalism, and individual rights, laying the intellectual foundations of modern India's democratic consciousness. Then contribution. What are his contribution to India's democratic and modern political consciousness? First is the promotion of individual rights, which we call liberalism. He advocated freedom of speech, press, and religion as essential civil liberties. And an example can be given as his opposition to restrictions on vernacular press act. Secondly, constitutionalism and rule of law, which means constitutional governance. He favored constitutional government, accountability, equality. See, these are the keywords, okay? And you can give an example. He gave memorials to British Parliament demanding judicial and administrative reforms. Next is the social equality, that is the social justice. He challenged oppressive social practices, promoted gender justice. For example, his campaign against sati, which is very famous, support for widow marriage, women's inheritance rights, etc. See, since he has done so much of things, that is why he is regarded as father of Indian Renaissance. Next is the rationalism and scientific temper, that is a modern thought, whatever he was advocated. He encouraged reason over superstition and promoted modern education. For example, support for the English education and establishment of the Hindu college. Next is the religious reforms and secular outlook, that is a religious tolerance kind of thing. So he advocated monotheism, interfaith dialogue, opposed religious orthodoxy. Example, founded the Brahma Sabha in 1828. See, if you don't write the years, that is not a problem. Try to write this, founded the Brahma Samaj. Awakening political consciousness, that is a proto-nationalism, inspired Indians to question colonial practices, demanded representative governance, and how he criticized, that you can give us an example. So next is, you have to conclude the answer. Rajaram Mohan Roy's legacy extends beyond social reform. His advocacy of liberty, equality, constitutionalism, rational inquiry, and social justice anticipated the core values later embodied in the Indian Constitution. See, you are writing this to a contemporary relevance, and okay, making him a true intellectual architect of modern democratic India. Okay, now we can move to the next question. This question is regarding the revolt of 1857. This is again a typical classic area for UPSC. The failure of revolt of 1857 was due as much to its internal weakness, first part of the question, as to the British military superiority. Critically examine. You have to write the both parts to this question. So you can give an example, give a good introduction. Revolt of 1857 often emerged as India's first war of independence, posed the most serious challenge to British rule. However, its failure resulted from a combination of this kind of things. So if you want, you can add a map. Obviously, you can show the major areas of revolt of 1857. If time and space permits you, you always have the liberty to add the maps, flowcharts, diagrams, etc. So now we move to the first part of the question, that is the internal weakness. So what was the internal weaknesses that led to the revolt? First point, lack of unified leadership. There was a leadership crisis in India. So there was no central command or coordinated strategy among the rebel leaders. So what was the situation at that time? There were independent leadership of Rani Lakshmi Bai, Nana Sahib, Kanwar Singh, Begum Hazrat Mahal, etc. And there was no something called a unified leadership. Okay, so that was one of the weakness we had at that point of time. Secondly, limited geographical spread, that is regional limitation. The revolt remained confined mainly to northern India and central India, while northeast and southern India was left without much sparks about this revolt. So Punjab, Bengal, Madras, Bombay presidencies remained largely peaceful. Next is the absence of a common ideology that we call nationalism. There was lack of nationalism. So rebels fought for diverse and local objectives rather than a unified national cause. And for example, restoration of Bahadur Shah too was not accepted by all groups. Next is a limited support that we call the social fragmentation. Many princes, zamindars and educated elites didn't support this revolt, okay. So it always had this limited geographical extent. So support extended to British rulers. See, many of the Indians, like rulers of Patiala, Hyderabad and Gwalior, what they did was they extended their support to Britishers. So the movement was having limited support. So the next part of the question, the British military superiority from the British point of view. Superior military organization, that is the professional army. They had a very professional army, better trained troops, disciplined command and effective logistics. Okay, these are the good keywords. So rapid reinforcement, this can give any example can be given here, like whatever was British has won here or whatever things they used, you can give any kind of examples here. Okay. Next is the technological superiority. That is, they're having the modern warfare, advanced artillery, rifles, communication systems. Example, use of telegraph, you can give, railways, you can give. Then financial and naval strength. They always had this resource advantage. Okay. Greater financial resources, the reinforcements from Britain and other colonies via sea routes, they always had that financial strength. Then divide and rule strategy, that is a political diplomacy. Secured support from loyal princes, Sikhs and Gurkhas. Assistance from Sikh regiments, they got it, okay, actually they got it. Or you can conclude the answer. The revolt of 1857 failed because internal disunity, regional limitations and absence of a coherent national program. And it was brilliantly exploited by Britishers. So you can, whatever good conclusion you can give here. And one important thing to note here is that this kind of static topics, okay, have a good introduction and ready-made conclusion. Ready-made introduction and conclusion by yourself, so that whenever such kind of questions come now, you can directly give it. There is no point of wasting your time to find the intro and conclusions. Okay. Next question is again regarding French Revolution. Although French Revolution failed to establish a stable democratic order immediately, it permanently transformed Europe. Critically examined. It's a 10 marker, obviously 150 words, so you can give an introduction. The French Revolution overthrew absolute monarchy and feudalism, proclaiming the ideals of liberty, equality and fraternity. Although political instability followed, its long-term ideological and institutional impact reshaped Europe and the modern world. Okay, so if you want, you can give a map, draw a world map of India, focus on the French Revolution areas, you can give it. That is the European areas, you can give it. So first point, failure to establish a stable democratic order. That is first point, political instability. You can give a keyword, constitutional crisis. So you can give there were frequent changes in government, prevented the establishment of a stable democratic institution. Example, constitutional monarchy to a national convention to directory to a consulate. Next was the reign of terror, that is authoritarianism. Democratic ideas gave way to violence, suppression, etc. That is, you can talk about the reign of terror under Robespierre, you can talk about it. Then rise of Napoleon. Democracy was replaced by an authoritarian empire. Napoleon crowned himself emperor in 1804. Then limited political participation. That was a restricted thing. Restricted democracy. Universal democratic rights were not sustained. Women didn't have those political rights. So women's political clubs were banned in 1793. This year, don't focus on such years. You just write the content. Okay. Next is economic and social turmoil. That is a governance crisis. Inflation, food shortages, civil unrest, etc. These kind of things were happening. So we have addressed the first part of the question, that is the French Revolution failed to establish a stable democratic order. Now we are looking how it permanently transformed the Europe. First of all, abolition of feudalism. Okay. Entered the feudal privileges, hereditary aristocratic dominance. So what happened? You can write as an example, abolition of feudal dues in France. Next is rise of nationalism. Okay, nation, state, this kind of thing. fostered the idea of nationhood based on shared identity rather than the dynastic rule, inspired the Italian and German unification later. Okay. Next is spread of liberalism and constitutionalism, what we call the rule of law. Promoted constitutional government, civil liberties and equality before the law. Example, it inspired the revolutions of 1830, 1848 across the Europe. Legal and administrative reform, that is, we are talking how they paved the way for a modern state. Okay. Introduced uniform laws, secular governance, merit-based administration. You can mention about the Napoleonic Code. Okay. Next is the principle of popular sovereignty, that is the democratic legacy. Established that political authority derives from the people and not divine right. You can write about any revolutions which you know. See, there is nothing as a cut and tie rule, like you have to give examples for every points. Okay, if you give examples for 2-3 points and write the next 4 points as such itself, it's fine. There is no point like you should give example for every point, because the thing that you should be concerned is about your page limit, word limits and time limits. Okay. And you can conclude it. While French Revolution failed to promote immediate political stability, it irreversibly transformed Europe by promoting liberalism, nationalism, constitutionalism, secularism, all these are the keywords. Okay. And equality, making it a defining milestone in the emergence of modern democratic state. Okay, now we go to the next question regarding the unification of Italy and Germany. The unification of Italy and Germany transformed the political map of Europe. Okay, a statement is given. Analyze the factors that led to their unification and assess their impact on European politics. It's a 10-marker question, 150 words. Okay. Unification of Italy and Germany marked the triumph of nationalism over dynastic rule, or whatever introduction you know, you can give it. It would be better if you mention the years and some leaders who are associated with this movement. Okay, that would fetch you more marks than a general introduction. Next is factors leading to the unification of Italy and Germany. First is rise of nationalism, that is having a national ideology. Okay. Nationalistic sentiments inspired people to unite on the basis of a common language, culture and history. Example, you can give any example if you find there, like pan-German movement or about Mazzini, if you know, you can give. If you don't know anything also, no issues, write some 5 to 7 points as such it is. And if you know any examples, you can give it, no problem. Otherwise, try to write down the points. Okay. Next is visionary leadership, which we call the political leadership. Many dynamic leaders provided the political direction and diplomatic strategy. You can talk about the Bismarck and his policy of blood and iron. Okay, that's a good example. Next is the military success, the wars of unification. Strategic wars eliminated the rival powers and united the fragmented states. You can, if you know about Italy wars about Austria, you can talk about the Franco-Prussian War, or you can talk about the Austro-Prussian War. If you see all these kind of examples you might be knowing, give 1 or 2 examples. Okay. Next is the diplomatic alliances. Alliances isolated opponents and secured international support. You can talk about Cavour allied with France against Austria. Bismarck isolated France before 1870. You can, if you know, you can give this example. And next you can talk about the economic integration, economic cooperation and how it strengthened the political unity. Now we talk about how was its impact on European politics. Okay. See, this is one of the major movements, so it had huge impacts. Okay. First one, it changed the balance of power. A unified Germany emerged as Europe's strongest military and industrial power. Okay. For example, German Empire proclaimed at the Palace of Versailles, you can give this example. Rise of aggressive nationalism, what we call the militant nationalism. It became increasingly competitive. Okay. Rivalries among Germany, France, Austria, Hungary, you can give. You should mention about this alliance system. Okay, the power blocks, how this kind of triple alliance and triple entente formed, you can give about this. Next is intensification of imperialism, that is a colonial competition. Newly unified states competed for overseas colonies, and how you can give the Germany, how it entered the scramble for Africa. It's very important. And from scramble for Africa also you can expect a question. This is also very important. Just for this scramble for Africa, they can ask an independent question. Okay, so prepare on this topic too. Then how it was the road to the First World War. You know how it led to the outbreak of World War I. So you can effectively conclude the unification of Italy and Germany completed the transition from fragmented kingdoms in Europe to the modern nation state, but it also intensified nationalism, militarism, power politics, laying the foundations for major conflicts in 20th century Europe. So this kind of conclusion gives a balanced tone to your question. Okay. The next question is, discuss the challenges faced by India in achieving political integration after independence. Okay, this is the first part of the question. And second part is, describe the role of Sardar Patel in this process. It's a 10 marker, 150 words question. Okay, give a decent intro. At independence in 1947, India inherited over 560 princely states. And what was the situation at that time? There was communal tensions, territorial uncertainties, etc. So political integration was essential for a nation building, and the leadership of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, assisted by VP Menon, ensured the creation of a united Indian Union. Okay, this is a very good introduction. Okay. Next is we have to talk about the challenges faced by India. Okay, what were the challenges? First of all, the integration of princely states. Okay, more than we mentioned here, there were more than 560 princely states. Okay, so more than 560 princely states, they had to be integrated to the Indian Union. Okay, so this was one of the biggest challenge before Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. So you can talk about how we annexed Hyderabad, Junagadh, Jammu Kashmir, etc. Okay, you can give this is a good example to be given here. Okay, next is partition and communal violence. Post-independence India, once India was born, there were widespread riots and mass migration, which was really threatening the political stability of India. So you can talk about violence in Punjab and Bengal after participation, and this kind of whatever um, riots in northwest areas of India now, like Punjab, Pakistan bordering areas now, it was very intense here. Next is the secessionist tendencies. That is, some rulers wanted independence or some wanted to go to Pakistan. So example, you can mention about Nizam of Hyderabad, Nawab of Junagadh, you can mention here. It's a good example. Next is the administrative integration, that we had to maintain that institutional consolidation. It was like we were having diverse administrative, judicial, revenue systems, so it was very difficult to unify. Next is the external threats. Okay, the word geopolitical challenges. Even Pakistan's attempts on India was can be mentioned. You can talk about the tribal invasions of Jammu Kashmir. You can talk about it. Next is the regional, linguistic, and cultural diversity. This was a real challenge. Okay, so integrating various linguistic and ethnic regions was a real threat. So that is why we have to pass the States Reorganization Act in 1956. You can mention about this. Now we move to what was the role of Sardar Patel in political integration. First one is the instrument of accession, that was a kind of diplomatic integration, and he persuaded princely states to come to Indian Union through a constitutional provisions. Okay, more than 560 princely states signed to the instrument of accession and they were integrated to India. See, Sardar Patel was a major leader behind this. Okay, next is the diplomatic negotiations. Okay, under persuasion, you can use this kind of keywords. It was how they persuaded and used persuasion, assurances, and political realism to secure peaceful integration. Okay, so you can mention about Travancore, Bhopal, Jodhpur, etc. How peacefully Patel indulged in this kind of persuasion and he tried to integrate them to Indian nation. Next is a firm use of police force. Okay, authorized military action when diplomacy failed, like Operation Polo, how the police force they used to integrate Hyderabad. Next is the integration through plebiscite, that is the democratic legitimacy. You can mention about the Junagadh case, how it was integrated to India. You can mention it. Next is the administrative reorganization, like merge numerous small princely states into a viable administrative unit. See this, some small rulers were ruling. Okay, so it was like patches here and there. So there was a need to integrate all this to a viable administrative unit. So it's having definite space. Okay, so that we can rule them properly. So example, formation of Saurashtra, Madhya Bharat, you can mention this. Next, he prevented the balkanization of India. Like he didn't allow India to have this kind of scramble. Okay, he ensured a strong and cohesive union preventing political fragmentation, and successful integration of almost all princely states by 1950 earned him the title the Iron Man of India. This is very important, Patel, okay. So you can give a very optimistic good conclusion. Sardar Patel's vision, diplomacy and firmness, these are the keywords that can be used here. Transformed a politically fragmented subcontinent into a unified nation state, okay. His role in integrating the princely states earned him the title Iron Man of India and made political integration one of the greatest achievements of post-independence India. Okay, we can conclude in this kind of way, okay. Now we move to the ninth question. We are given a paragraph, okay. Whenever UPSC comes with something, mammoth like this, don't lose your confidence on saying such kind of questions. Just read it. There might be nothing important in this part. Whatever being asked in the question of, focus only on it, okay. Women transformed the Indian national movement from an elite political struggle into a truly mass movement. Under Mahatma Gandhi's leadership, they participated in picketing, boycotts, satyagrahas, and constructive programs, challenging both colonial rule and traditional social barriers. Their participation imparted greater moral legitimacy and social depth to the freedom struggle. Okay, so here comes a question. Analyze the role of women in Gandhian phase of freedom struggle. Okay, and how it contributed to the nationalist movement. So you can give a good introduction, but how, see, Mahatma Gandhi is very important area. You can expect question in both prelims and mains. So prepare a good introduction for Gandhi pre-handedly so that you can use it whenever it is being asked, okay. Under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi, women emerged as an active participant in the freedom struggle. Gandhi transformed the nationalistic movement into a people's movement. This is a keyword here. Enabling women from diverse social backgrounds to engage in satyagraha, another keyword. Constructive work, another keyword, and mass mobilization, thereby democratizing Indian nationalism. So now we move to role of women in Gandhian phase. First is participation in mass civil disobedience. We call it mass mobilization. Women actively joined the non-cooperation, civil disobedience, etc. For example, you can mention Sarojini Naidu led the Dharasana Salt Satyagraha. You can mention about that. Picketing and boycott campaigns. Women organized picketing of liquor and foreign clothes shops and promoted Swadeshi. Example, women volunteers in Madras, Bombay, Bengal. Next is about the constructive programs. Promoted khadi, village industries, literacy, hygiene, etc. Women spinning charkha and participating in village reconstruction. Next is about the leadership and political participation. Women assumed the leadership roles, okay. For example, when the Quit India movement went leaderless, Aruna Asif Ali hoisted the national flag, okay. This is very important. Underground resistance. Here again, when Quit India movement leaders were arrested and the movement went leaderless now, this Usha Mehta operated Congress radio during the Quit India movement. You can write about this. Breaking social barriers, that is women's emancipation. Political participation challenged patriarchal norms, etc. Example, you can mention about Kasturba Gandhi and how she led the satyagrahas and how she inspired women to enter the public life. Now we discuss about the contribution to democratization of nationalist movement. Broad-based mass participation, which we call inclusive nationalism. Okay, there was a large-scale participation and they enhanced moral legitimacy, that is ethical politics. For example, women volunteers facing police oppression without retaliation. Okay, under Gandhi, women were more into Indian freedom struggle. Next is the social inclusion. Encourage participation across caste, class, and regional divides. Women from different communities joined the Quit India movement. We have mentioned earlier about Aruna Asif Ali and Usha Mehta. Next is the political awakening. Fostered political awareness and citizenship among women and increased participation in local Congress committees. You can write this example. Next is strengthen the grassroots mobilization. Women spread nationalistic ideas through households, villages, self-help activities. You can mention about khadi promotion and door-to-door mobilization. See, this kind of examples you can find it easily from NCERTs, your standard books, etc. Or if you're not able to find it, just Google it. You can find it and have some 5 to 6 examples ready-made in your hand so that you can use it at any time and space. Okay. Next is the foundation of women's rights. For example, universal adult franchise was guaranteed to women in the Constitution of India. You can write about it. Okay. So, conclude very optimistically, women's participation under Gandhi transformed the freedom struggle into a broad-based democratic movement combining political resistance with social reform. Their contributions not only accelerated the struggle for independence, but also laid the foundation of gender equality. This is the keyword. participatory democracy, another keyword, and inclusive nation building in independent India. So prepare this kind of conclusions pre-handedly. Okay. Next is discuss the salient features of cabinet mission plan. Why did it ultimately fail despite initial acceptance by both International Congress and the Muslim League? Another 10 marker, 150 words. Give an introduction, like it was proposed by whatever leaders, if you know, Lord Pentheus Lawrence, Stafford Cripps, and A.V. Alexander, and give a decent intro about it. Now we move to the salient features of cabinet mission plan. First is the rejection of Pakistan because it always emphasized on unity and integrity of India. Next is a three-tier federal structure, like they proposed a three-level constitutional framework, union, provincial, and individual provinces, and limited the powers to the union. Then there was provincial grouping. They proposed a constituent assembly, and constituent assembly it owes its origin to cabinet mission plan. Next is an interim government. Okay, they recommended the formation of interim government comprising major political parties until a constitution was formed. So now we look, what was the failure? Okay, what was the reasons for the failure? You can mention, like, first one is divergent interpretation of provincial grouping. Okay, they told about the provincial grouping, but how it was interpreted was differently. Next is Congress vision of a strong center. Okay, Congress opposed the proposed weak union, considering it as detrimental to national unity. Then Muslim League's continued demand for Pakistan. That was again a problem. Breakdown of political trust between Congress and Muslim League. That was another problem. Then you can talk about the direct action day, how the Muslim League called for it, and the British policy ambiguities. Okay, and you can effectively conclude it. Although cabinet mission plan failed to although cabinet mission plan failed, there was some due to some political differences and mutual distrust, etc. It laid the institutional framework for constitutional assembly, because our constitutional assembly is basically from cabinet mission plan. Okay, that is the end of the 10 markers. Okay, now we move to the 15 markers. Okay, you will be given 3 pages for this kind of questions, and you have to give a decent answer in 250 words. First question is regarding Indus Valley. So this is an important area. The architectural legacy of Indus Valley civilization lies more to its functional public infrastructure than its monumental buildings. Okay, that is a statement is being given. Discuss with suitable examples from later in ancient India. Okay, so they are talking like the legacy of Indus Valley. It is holding more to the functional public utility infrastructure, like whatever things they have built and kept, like the urban layout, advanced drainage, than the monumental things, and how these things. Discuss with suitable examples from later, how these things influence the later India. So again, Indus Valley is a static topic. You can expect a question anytime. So prepare a decent intro for yourself, and always try to add a map of India showing some 5 to 6 important Indus Valley sites like Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Rakhigarhi or Chanudaro, this kind of Dholavira, Lothal, this kind of important sites can be mentioned in the map. Okay, then we move to the, like, we can give, try to mention the year in the introduction. That will give a value to your answer. Now we move to the first part, functional public infrastructure of the Indus Valley. Okay, the first one was a planned urban layout, that is urban planning. Cities were built on a grid pattern with well planned streets and residential sectors. You can talk about the Mohenjo-daro, Harappa. You can even mention about the Citadel and Lower Town. Next is advanced drainage system. You can talk about the covered drains and how every individual houses had the drain network, and how example you can give about the brick lining in the drains. Then next is water management, that is hydraulic engineering component. You can talk about reservoirs at Dholavira. Every house had wells, bathrooms, etc. Next is about the public utility structures like civic infrastructure, like Great Bath of Mohenjo-daro, Granary of Harappa. You can mention about it, how these buildings were carefully designed. Next is the standardized construction. Okay, you can mention about standard brick ratio of 1:2:4, which was used, and they used uniform baked bricks, standardized the measurements. Next is scientific town planning. There was a functional segregation of Citadel and Lower Town. Example, you can give a Citadel complex at any in the site. Okay, how this legacy is reflected in later ancient India. See, regarding water management system, you can see how the Sudarshan Lake, how it was very well maintained. how it was repaired, this kind of things shows the importance of this. Then urban planning, planned city scheme. For example, you can mention about Pataliputra, this how it was described by Megasthenes. Pataliputra you can mention here. Public welfare infrastructure, you can mention about Ashoka, how he created the roads, wells and shade trees. So these kind of things now, it have a continuity from Indus. Then you can mention about the standardized architecture, continued use of standardized construction, example Mauryan polished stone architecture. Next you can mention about public religious architecture, community oriented religious structures. For example, we talked about Great Bath, okay. Similarly, you can talk about Sanji Stupa. Next about the water structures, you talked about water structures and reservoirs at Dholavira. Similarly, we were having rocket cisterns in Western Ghats around Buddhist caves, okay. So you can give a decent conclusion. The true architectural genius of Indus Valley lays in its functional, people-centric urban planning, which established ensuring principles of public health, keyword, water management and civic administration. And this continued to influence later ancient Indian urban traditions, even as monumental religious architecture became prominent. Okay, you can effectively conclude. Now we move to our questions about Guptas and Cholas, again a typical area for UPSC. While the Guptas laid the foundations of classical Indian culture, the Cholas carried Indian cultural influence beyond its shores. You have to elucidate. Okay, 15 marker, obviously 250 words. So the Gupta Empire is regarded as the golden age of India, fostering the development of classic Indian culture and Chola dynasty. Whatever it is, all you can write about it. And you can add a map showing Guptas and Cholas, a very decent small map you can add to this question. Next, Guptas laid the foundation of classical Indian culture. First one is the literature. Sanskrit literature reached its zenith under the royal patronage. You can mention about Kalidasa's Abhignana Shakuntalam and Meghaduta. It's very prominent, very remarkable, very famous. Try to quote the famous examples. Next is art and sculpture. Developed the idealized style of Indian sculpture. You can talk about Sarnath, Buddha and Udayagiri caves. Next is the temple architecture. That is the Nagara style. Laid the foundation of structural Hindu temples. You know, it was being started at that time. You can talk about the Shavadara temple or Bittergone temple, you can talk about. Next is the scientific and maths component. You can talk about significant achievements in mathematics, astronomy. You can mention about Aryabhatta. It's a good example. Next is the religion and philosophy. The cultural synthesis component promoted the Hinduism while extending patronage to Buddhism. You can talk about construction of temples, Buddhist monasteries, etc. Next is the education. It's very important for Gupta period because this kind of Nalanda University, it expanded during this period. Okay, so you can talk about centers of higher learning. Okay, you can talk about that. Next is the next part of the question: how Cholas carried the Indian culture beyond the shores. Okay, about their maritime expansion, you can talk naval expedition of Rajendra Chola to Srivijaya. Then the spread of Hinduism. Okay, promoted Shaivism, Vaishnavism in Southeast Asia. Then Hindu temple, you can talk about temples in Cambodia and Indonesia. Next is temple architecture. You can, whatever Guptas has started about temple architecture, now Cholas reached it to the higher, made it to the highest point. Okay. So you can talk about the magnificent temples which became the symbols of Indian artistic excellence. You can talk about Brihadishwara temple. Okay. Next is trade and cultural heritage, Indian Ocean Network. You can talk about the merchant guilds. You can mention about Manigramam. Okay, Manigramam guild is very famous. Then Ayavold 500. If you're not able to remember this name, just go for this Manigramam. Okay. Then spread of Tamil culture. Okay, Tamil language, literature, and administrative practices influenced overseas kingdom. You can talk about inscriptions. Okay, Tamil inscriptions. Then bronze sculpture tradition. The Guptas have one of the very finest bronze sculptures. Okay. So perfected lost wax technique influencing religious art beyond India. You can talk about Chola Nadaraja, which is very famous. Okay. The Guptas, so you can effectively conclude it. The Guptas provided the intellectual and cultural foundations of classical Indian civilization, while Cholas ensured its global diffusion, continuity, etc. Together, what happened? They transformed India into both a sender and transmitter of civilization, shaping cultural history of India. It's a very good conclusion, which is perfectly aligned with the question. Now we move to the 13th question. The Portuguese entered the Indian Ocean as conquerors but survived largely as custodians of few coastal enclaves. Analyze the political, military and economic factors that led to this decline. Okay. So this question is very evident. See, the Portuguese came to India with an intention of having an empire building in India, but what happened? They were very much, you know, they were very much diminished to as custodians of few coastal enclaves. Okay, so we can analyze what happened. So the keyword, okay, is to analyze, and 15 markers, 15 mark, 250 words. Okay. So the arrival of Vasco da Gama at Calicut 1498 marked the beginning of Portuguese dominance in the Indian Ocean, although they initially sought to establish a maritime empire, which is called Estado da India. By the 18th century, their influence had shrunk. So you can shrunk to, this is good. If you give this example here, it's very good. Goa, Damandiu. Okay. So what were the political factors? First one is weak successors and corrupt administration. Inefficient governors, corruption weakened the thing. For example, mismanagement in Goa you can give. Hostility of Indian powers. Okay, powerful Indian kingdoms challenged the Portuguese expansion. For example, expansion from Zamorin of opposition from Zamorin of Calicut and Maratha Empire, you can give it, and the Bijapur Sultanate. Next is the limited territorial policy. Okay, it was more to the coastal orientation, focused mainly on port rather than building a strong inland empire. Okay, for example, you can mention about the concentration, Goa, Damandiu, etc. Then religious intolerance. So what happened now? These people was very busy in holding the conversions, religious conversions. So what happened? This kind of thing made them to lose the local support, and you can mention about the Goa Inquisition. Then rise of strong naval European rivals, better organized. See, when the Dutch or English came to India now, they were having better, very better, this kind of organized army, military, etc. So Portuguese was not able to withstand with them, and ultimately they were reduced to having some coastal enclaves. Okay. Next, we mentioned about the military factors, that is loss of naval supremacy. Decline in naval power. Okay, that's a maritime weakness. Portuguese naval superiority eroded due to outdated ships. Okay, you can mention about the Battle of Swali, that how defeated by the Dutch. Okay. Next is superior European rivals. Okay, European, it's very regarding English, they had the best naval, military, etc. These kind of things. Okay, you can mention about that capture of Malacca. Next is limited military resources. Okay, Portugal lacked manpower and finances. For example, they lost the Hormuz Strait. Okay, if you don't know this example, no issue, just write the point. Okay. Next is repeated defeat by Indian powers. Indian rulers increasingly challenged Portuguese ports and trade. So, like you can mention about the Maratha attacks. Next is over dependence on fortified ports. That is a defense strategy. Ports became isolated as island influence. See that you can mention about the dependence of Goa, though after losing many overseas territory. Okay, you can mention about this. Next is failure to modernize. This, like whatever English and Dutch now, they were trying to modernize their army, but Portuguese failed to do it. Now we talk about the economic factors. Monopoly trade collapsed. Okay. So whatever they were trying to do with the arrival of Dutch and English, the spice trade was really affected. Then inefficient carter system. Okay. See, this courtesy system, it was very inefficient, and after duplex and all, it was very difficult for them to maintain this. So what happened? Their importance have been eroded. Next is declining revenue. Okay, that is failing in trade profits. Then they could not do the spices trade, so the profits was reducing. So they couldn't get much revenue. Shift in global trade. Okay, European companies established more efficient commercial system, like Dutch dominance in Indonesia, you can mention in spices trade. So Portuguese started to decline. Okay. Next is corruption and smuggling. There were illegal private trade, so this led to corruption, smuggling, these kind of things. Next is limited investment. Okay, financial superiority. They were not able to maintain it, so it gradually led to the decline in investments. So you can conclude, by 18th century, Portuguese power had contracted from an ambitious maritime empire to a handful of coastal possessions. Their decline highlights how political weaknesses and military stagnation, economic inefficiency can erode even the earliest colonial dominance in Indian Ocean. We can conclude this effectively. Next question is type of analyze, examine kind of question. Examine how the objectives, methods, of peasant movements varied according to the nature of exploitation by zamindars, moneylenders and colonial state. Okay, how this peasant movements varied as per zamindars, moneylenders and colonial state you can mention. So you can give a decent introduction. Peasant movements in colonial India were not homogeneous. Their objectives and methods differed accordingly to the primary source of exploitation, because these people were exploited by zamindars, again by moneylenders and by colonial state, and they had different approach and different reactionary measures against three. Okay. While some movement demanded economic justice, others evolved into anti-colonial political struggle. So now we can look how it differed. Okay. So peasant movements against zamindars, first was reduction in rent. Okay. They refused to pay the rent. You can mention about Badoli Satyagraha. Next is protection of tenancy, legal petitions. You can mention about Pabna agrarian leagues. Next is end of forced labor. Okay, they try to end this forced labor, and you can mention about non-cooperation, social boycott, these kind of things. Then abolition of illegal cess. You can mention about Awadh Kisan Sabha. Next is how it was with money lenders. Okay, they tried to get the debt relief. You can mention about Deccan rights. Then they tried to attack on money lenders record. Again, you can mention about Deccan rights. Then cancellation of debt bond. Okay, they burned it. You can see it in riots in Pune and Ahmednagar. Then it was collective renaissance resistance they had against money lenders. You can mention about the protest in Maharashtra. And they demanded for legal reforms. You can mention the Deccan Agriculturist Relief Act. Next is against the colonial state. You can mention about tax refusal, example Champaran Satyagraha, Bardoli Satyagraha. Then non-violent resistance, you can mention about Champaran, Tinkatiya system. Okay, then resistance to colonial policies, like they were having mass protest. Okay, you can mention about the Indigo revolt. Then Gandhian non-cooperation they were using against colonial state. You can mention about Kheda. Then they were integrated with the national movement. You can mention about their participation in civil disobedience and non-cooperation. Then you can mention about the mass mobilization, like how the peasants participated in Quit India. Okay, when Gandhi was entering into politics, he had this kind of mass mobilization. Peasants were more into the freedom struggle. And you can effectively conclude how they evolved from a localized economic protest to a broad-based nationalistic movements, and you can conclude it effectively. Next is the 15th question. The socio-religious reform movements of the 19th century acted as a catalyst of social transformation and national awakening in India. Critically assess their achievements and limitations. So you can give an introduction. 19th century socio-religious reform movements emerged as a response to social evils like religious orthodoxy, colonial critics, etc., led by reformers such as Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Swami Dayananda Saraswati, Swami Vivekananda, Jyotirao Phule. It would be better if you give the names here. Okay. They promoted rationalism, social reform, national consciousness, etc., laying the intellectual foundations of modern India. Next is what about the achievements? Okay, you can talk about eradication of social evils, like you can mention abolition of sati by the efforts of Raja Ram Mohan Roy, child marriage, female infanticide, etc. You can talk about women empowerment. You can mention Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, women's education, widow remarriage, etc. You can even mention about Hindu Widow Remarriage Act. You can mention about spread of modern education, that is the intellectual awakening. You can mention about Aligarh movement and DAV schools. Okay, about the scientific temper. Then about rationalism, you can mention about Brahma Samaj. About nation awakening, you can mention about Swami Vivekananda's speech at Parliament of World's Religions. Regarding upliftment of marginalized section, you can talk about Satyashodak Samaj by Jyotirao Phule. Okay, try to give the examples so that whatever points you write now, examiner gets very much connected with you. Okay. Now you can mention about the limitations, limited social outreach, that is mostly they were urban centric, means they were not able to have much hold in rural India. Next is incomplete attack on caste system, like many reformers opposed untouchability but did not reject the caste system completely. Next is regional concentration, that is a limited outreach, like Brahma Samaj in Bengal, Pratana Samaj in Bombay, they were not beyond this kind of regions. Okay. Next is limited women's participation. Why? Because of the patriarchal constraints. Women were beneficiaries more than leaders in many reform movements. Leadership remained largely male dominated. Next is a revivalistic tendencies, back to Veda slogan of Arya Samaj. This kind of things now. It was not that, like it focused on ancient traditions. That conservatism was backfired. Next is limited economic agenda. Example, agrarian distress remained largely outside the reform agenda. Okay, so this caused a problem. And you can effectively conclude the social religious reform movements acted as a bridge between tradition and modernity, fostering social reform, intellectual awakening, and early nationalism. Despite their limitations, they laid the ideological foundations for both the Indian national movement and the constitutional values of equality, liberty, social justice, and independent India. You can effectively conclude like this. Next is the 16th question. Analyze the circumstances that led to the launch of Quit India movement and how did it differ from earlier Gandhian movements. You have to compare it. So you can give a introduction. You should mention this slogan anyhow because this is very important. Quit India movement, if you write the exact thing, this is important. Quit India movement launched on 8th August 1942 with Mahatma Gandhi is called Do or Die. Marked the final mass struggle against British rule. It arose from failure of constitutional negotiations, wartime developments, and growing public impatience with the colonial rule. Okay. So let's go to the question. Circumstances leading to the Quit India movement. First is failure of the Krebs mission that created a constitutional deadlock. Okay. So British refused for the immediate self-government. So Krebs mission proposals were rejected. Next is impact of World War II, war without consent. So India was dragged into the war without having her consent. So you can mention with the viceroy. Okay. Then next is growing anti-colonial sentiment. That is the demand for complete independence. Congress believed British rule had become the greatest obstacle to India's freedom. You can mention about the demand for immediate British withdrawal. Then about the Japanese advance in Asia, security concerns. You can mention that was also a circumstance leading to the in this movement, Quit India movement. Next, you can mention about the economic hardships. Okay, price of essential commodities and famines affecting India. Next, you can mention about the failure of earlier constitutional efforts. Okay, August offer, Krebs mission. People have lost the faith in this kind of things. Okay, Indians was not satisfied. Then how it was different from earlier Gandhian movements. That is the next part of the question. You can talk about how in objective it was different. Earlier movements sought reforms or constitutional concessions, but Quit India was very different. It demanded immediate British withdrawal. Okay, for example, Quit India, do or die slogan. This was much more to the other side. Next is the nature of leadership. Okay, it was leaderless movement. National leaders were arrested, but what happened? Local leaders like Aruna Asaf Ali, Usha Mehta, Jayaprakash Narayan, etc. assumed the leadership and they led the movement. Okay. Next is about the nature of protest, how it referred. It was a spontaneous resistance. Unlike the disciplined campaigns of earlier movement, it was not like that. It was more spontaneous. Attacks on railways, telegraph lines, and police stations you can mention. Underground activities, you can talk about secret resistance. You can talk about the Congress radio operated by Usha Mehta. Then parallel government, that is alternate kind of administration was established at Sathara, Balia, and Tamarlipta by Tamarlipta. This kind of things you can mention. Next is the scale of repression. Okay, the British response was more severe than in previous movements. Mass arrest, censorship, firing on the protesters, aerial attacks in some areas, and even every leader was arrested. Okay, it was more or less a leaderless movement. Okay, so you can conclude it. The Quit India movement was a culmination of Gandhian mass politics and simultaneously marked the beginning of a decentralized radical phase of Indian freedom struggle. It accelerated the end of British rule and paved the way for India's independence. So it's very optimistic kind of conclusion. Now we move to the 17th question. To what extent did the Swadeshi movement succeeded in mobilizing different sections of the society? And what were the challenges? Okay. You can give the introduction. Swadeshi movement emerged in response to the partition of Bengal. Try to mention the year by Lord Curzon. Try to mention the viceroy. Going beyond the boycott of foreign goods, it became the first mass nationalist movement that sought to mobilize diverse sections of Indian society through economic nationalism, national education, political activism. These are the keywords. Okay. Success in mobilizing different sections of society. How the students and youth go by the dimensions. Okay. Students and youth. Students participated in protests, boycotts, and picketing became in the movement's most energetic force. Okay. Boycott of governments, establishment of National Council for Education. You can mention it. Next about women. You can talk about how they promoted Swadeshi goods spending, etc. That is participation, picketing, these kind of things. Then middle class and professionals, lawyers, teachers, journalists, intellectuals, etc. participated in the movement. You can mention about Surendranath Banerjee, Bipin Chandra Pal, and Aurobindo Ghosh. Okay. Next about industrialists and businessmen. Then expansion of indigenous textile mills, Bengal chemical works, etc. You can mention. Next is the peasants and workers. Okay. Earlier we told how the peasants were largely mobilized through Indian freedom struggle. You can mention about it. Next is the cultural and educational mobilization. Like you can talk about national schools, Rabindranath Tagore's Raksha Bandhan campaign, patriotic songs, etc. You can mention here. Next is the limitations. It was regional concentration, okay, limited geographical spread, morely in Calcutta and surrounding areas and Bengal. So it failed to reach to whole of India. Next is limited peasant participation due to its allied character. Okay, so limited involvement outside the politically active regions. You can mention about Northeast and South India. Then minimal worker involvement. Okay, few organized labor strikes directly linked to Swadeshi. It was minimal. Okay. Next is the communal divide. Support for the partition of Bengal by sections of Muslim elite. You can mention it. Economic constraints. Imported textiles in many regions. So when the fund was not being coming to India, it was a problem. Next is government's repression. You can talk about deportation of Bipin Chandra Pal, suppression of nationalistic newspapers, arrest of many peoples and being sent to jail also you can mention here. Okay. Although limited in geographical and social outreach, Swadeshi movement marked a turning point in Indian freedom struggle. It broadened the social base of nationalism, inspired future Gandhian movements and strengthened the ideas of self-reliance is a keyword. National education and indigenous enterprise, and you can conclude this answer effectively. Next is a question from art and culture. It's about Hoysalas. The artistic legacy of Hoysalas lies not merely in architectural innovation, but in redefining the relationship between religion and aesthetics, okay, and craftsmanship. Theoretically examine. So you can give a decent introduction regarding Hoysala, like you should mention the time period, which is very value addition to your answer. Transform Indian temple architecture by integrating religious devotion, artistic excellence, technical mastery, etc. Okay, if possible, add a map and show the Hoysala region, okay, of Belur, this kind of area, please show it. Next, we move to the artistic legacy. Question what is being asked not only lies in architectural innovation, but in redefining the relationship between religion, aesthetics, and craftsmanship. Okay, let's see. First is artistic legacy. You can talk about the architectural innovation, about the Vesara style. You can mention about how they blended Nagara and Dravidia to get the Vesara style. You can mention about the Chennakesava temple. Okay. Next is the sculptural excellence. You can mention about the stonecraft and how precisionly it was managed. You can talk about the Hoysaleshwara temple, how the delicate or jewelry ornaments and facial expressions are being represented there. Next is the star shape, that is a stellar pattern temple. It's very important. That is something which is unique to you, more unique to Hoysala. So you can mention about the Chennakeshwar temple of Belur. Next is a narrative friezes. Okay, that is a visual storytelling. There were panels narrating epics, Ramayana, etc., Bhagavad Purana, etc. Next, mention about the decorative brilliance. Okay, friezes of elephants, horses, lions, and Makara motifs. How it was very much ornamented to this kind of buildings. Next is the mastery of lathe turned pillars. Okay, that is the engineering precisions, like mirror like pillars in the Chennakesava temple, then symmetrical pillars, highly polished advanced stoneworks, how they managed you can mention. Next is redefining the relationship between next dimension. We are moving to the next part of the question, how it redefined the relation between religion, aesthetics, and craftsmanship. First one, religion as an artistic expression. You can mention about the Bhakti movement. Temples became centers of devotion. Okay, you can talk about sculptures of Vishnu, Shiva, Lakshmi, Narasimha. Next is integration of art and worship. You can mention about intricately curved Garbhagriha, Mandapa, Shikara, how it was held. Next is celebration of human creativity. The famous Manthanigas, that is Shilabhaligas of Belur, you can mention. If you don't know the examples also, now just try to write the points. Okay. And recognition of artisan skills. Okay, works of master sculpture, the Soja and his son Chavana at Belur, it's mentioned. Next, you can mention about religious pluralism. Patronage extended to Shaivism, Vaishnavism, Jainism. You can mention about Keshava temple, Hoysaleshwara temple, because these belong to one is Vaishnavite and one is Shaivite. Okay. You can also mention about influence of later South Indian architecture, influence of later, I mean, how Hoysala speed, influence on later, you kind this kind of Vijayanagara Empire, Hampi, etc. You can also mention there. So you can effectively conclude the Hoysalas transformed Indian temple sculpture architecture from a religious structure into a masterpiece of artistic imagination. Okay, their seamless fusion of faith, aesthetics, and craftsmanship represents one of the highest achievements of medieval Indian art, leaving an enduring legacy in the history of Indian architecture. It's a very good conclusion. Now we move to the next question. Critically examine the role of State Reorganization Act in 1956, strengthening India's federal structure while accommodating linguistic diversity. Okay, so give introduction about State Reorganization Act. So should mention Fasal Ali Commission. States Reorganization Act based on recommendation of State Reorganization Commission was the Fasal Ali Commission reorganized the boundaries of Indian states primarily on linguistic lines. It marked a crucial milestone in balancing national integration with regional aspirations, thereby shaping India's federal structure. Okay. Role in strengthening India's federal structure. What is the role? First one is strengthen the cooperative federalism, that is the center-state relations. For example, formation of Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, Karnataka, etc. Okay, it was on linguistic diversity, so it helped in redefining the center-state relations. Okay, next is enhanced administrative efficiency, that is a good governance. You can talk about the linguistically homogenized states, how it improved the governance and public service delivery, like administration, Telugu, Malayalam, Kannada languages. You can talk about it. Next is it deepened the democratic participation, like expansion of regional legislatures and local government. You can talk about it. People could interact with the government with their mother tongue. This kind of thing you can talk. Reduce regional alienation. Okay, see, it accommodated legitimate linguistic aspirations. Okay, so that regional alienation was greatly reduced. Next is the institutionalized asymmetric federalism. Okay, like you know, adapt. It can be adapted to regional diversity through peaceful constitutional means. Like you can mention about Article 3 and 4. Then it strengthened the national unity. You can talk about it, how the peaceful accommodation was done to Indian Union in federation. Then how it accommodated linguistic diversity. You can mention about recognition of linguistic identity. For example, formation of Kerala for Malayalam speakers. Formation of Kerala for Malayalam speakers, you can mention like Tamil Nadu, Andhra, etc. Promotion of regional languages like Kannada in Mysore state, Telugu in Andhra Pradesh, you can mention like regional languages became the medium of administration. Next is preservation of regional culture. You can talk about growth of Malayalam, Kannada, Telugu academies, like how it promoted local literature, cultural traditions, etc. Fourth is it reduced linguistic conflicts. Okay, that does it reorganization of Bombay, Madhya Pradesh, Punjab. Okay, these kind of areas you can mention. Next, you can talk about how it encouraged regional political leadership. Okay, growth of many regional political leaders and movements in India, it really helped. Okay. Next is strengthen the constitutional principle of unity and diversity. See, India evolved into one of the world's most successful multilingual federations. See, all these kind of regional aspirations, regional identities, India absorbed it and it went for the State Reorganization Act. Next is the critical analysis. See, although we talk about the good side of this, there are some issues we are still facing. First is did not end the linguistic demands. Okay, still demands are being asked. For example, formation of Gujarat, Maharashtra, Punjab, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Uttarakhand, and Telangana. Still, several new statehood movements are still happening. Next is rise of regionalism, like son of soil concept. It's being a problematic one now. Next, you can talk about the interstate boundary and river disputes. Like you can talk about the Kaveri river dispute or Belagavi dispute. Next is administrative challenge that is happening, like redistribution of assets, personal institutions, etc. So these kind of challenges are coming along with this, but India is addressing it. Okay. Conclusion, you can give the States Reorganization Act transformed India's political map by harmonizing linguistic aspirations with national unity. Although it generated new regional demands, it strengthened cooperative federalism, democratic decentralization, and constitutional idea of unity and diversity. Okay, we can mention it very optimistic conclusion. Now we move to the last question of our question paper, that is about militant nationalism. Militant nationalism represented not merely a change in methods but a redefinition of the ideological content of Indian nationalism, critically examined. So you can give a good introduction, mention the years. Militant nationalism emerged as a reaction to limitation of modern politics. Partition of Bengal, drawing disillusionment with constitutional methods led by Tilak. Bipin Chandra Lal, led by Lal Balpal and Aurobindo Ghosh. It transformed Indian nation from a petition-based movement, it's a keyword, petition-based movement into assertive demand for Swaraj. That is the keyword here. So, what is the change in methods? Boycott movement, okay. Boycott of British goods. As well, that was a change, that is economic resistance. Next is the Swadeshi movement for self-reliance. You can talk about Bengal Chemical Works and Swadeshi textile mills. Next is about national education. Okay, established Indian controlled education. You can mention about National Council of Education. Then passive resistance. You can talk about the boycott of government schools and lockouts. Next is the public mobilization. How they use festivals, public meetings, and newspapers. Like you can talk about Tilak, how we use the Ganapati celebrations and Kesari newspaper. Next is assertive political agitation. Preferred like how the leadership of Lal Bal Pal Prayo. You can how assertive was it? You can mention. So next part of the question is how it was a redefinition of Indian nationalism. You can mention about from constitutional reforms to Swaraj. Like how Tilak told, Swaraj is my birthright and I shall have it, and they went forward self-rule. Okay. Then from loyalty to resistance, like being loyal to British crown, they went to an assertive nationalism, boycott of British goods during Swadeshi. Economic nationalism, we can call it Swadeshi, boycott of textiles from British. You can mention about it. Next is the cultural nationalism, revival of India's indigenous identity. Used India's cultural heritage to inspire political unity and self-confidence. You can talk about Ganapati festival. You can talk about Shivaji festival. Okay. Next is mass political participation. Public participation in boycott movement like students, women, traders, sections of peasants, etc. participated in this. Next is the spirit of sacrifice and self-reliance. Okay, you can talk about national education movements, indigenous educational institutions. You can mention here. Now we move to the critical analysis side. First of all, the regional concentration. Most of it remained to Bengal, Maharashtra, Punjab regions. And you can talk about limited organizational unity because there were some internal issues regarding Surat split. Next is alienated moderates. Okay, they was weakened. That is a problem. Next is limited immediate success. Failed to secure Swaraj or reverse British rule immediately. And regarding social base, you can still, it was limited regarding peasants and workers, and you can also talk about colonial repression, arrest, censorship, deportation, etc. For example, arrest of Indira Gandhi is deportation. Now you can effectively conclude militant nationalism fundamentally redefined Indian nationalism by replacing constitutional loyalty with assertive self-rule, economic nationalism, cultural pride, and mass political mobilization. Although it had organizational limits, it laid the ideological foundation upon which Gandhian mass movements and later struggle were built. Okay, so that is the end of the 20 questions here. So we have discussed every 20 questions very elaboratively. You can use these points, these intro, body and points exactly to your answer. These are very good points. Okay, so try to revise this section once again before going for the exam. You can get good content for a history paper. Okay, that is it. Prepare well. All the best. Thank you.
Gallant IAS, chasing your passion to ace.